$5 in 1975 could buy you a full tank of gas, feed a family of four at McDonald's with money left over, or get you two movie tickets and popcorn. Today, that same $5 barely covers a single coffee at Tim Hortons. The gap isn't just inflation, it's the complete destruction of purchasing power that happened over 50 years, while wages failed to keep pace. In 1975, a gallon of gas cost 55 cents in Canada. With $5, you could buy 9 gallons. That would fill most cars completely and leave you change. Today, $5 buys you 2.8 liters of gas. That's less than 3/4 of a gallon. You can't even get across town. In 1975, the average Canadian house cost $43,000. A young couple working modest jobs could save for a down payment in 2 years and afford the mortgage on single income. Today, the average Canadian house costs $720,000. That same couple would need to save for 15 years for a down payment and couldn't afford the mortgage even with 2 incomes. In 1975, you could work a minimum wage job over the summer and pay for an entire year of university tuition. Today, you'd need to work full-time for an entire year just to cover 1 semester, and you'd still need loans for living expenses. Here's what $5 could actually buy you in 1975 Canada. What those same items cost today, and why the math reveals an economic catastrophe that destroyed the middle class, while everyone was told the economy was growing. In 1975, regular unleaded gasoline cost between 50 and 60 cents per gallon depending on your province. Let's use 55 cents as the average. Your $5 bought you 9 gallons of gas. A typical 1975 car had a 15-gallon tank, so $5 filled 60% of your tank. If you drove something economical like a Honda Civic or Volkswagen Beetle with a 10-gallon tank, you'd fill it completely and get $1 back in change. Gas wasn't just cheap, it was so cheap that driving costs barely registered as an expense. A full tank lasted the average driver 2 weeks. The monthly gas budget for most families was under $20. Today, that same full tank costs you $85 to $95 depending on current prices. The identical purchase that cost $5 in 1975 costs 18 times more today. But here's where it gets worse. In 1975, minimum wage in Ontario was $2.65 per hour. That means 1 hour of minimum wage work bought you 4.8 gallons of gas. Today, Ontario minimum wage is $16.55 per hour. At current gas prices of roughly $1.60 per liter, that same hour of work buys you 10.3 liters or 2.7 gallons. Your purchasing power for gas has declined by 44%, even though minimum wage increased more than 6 times over. The cost of getting to work has increased faster than wages. In 1975, a minimum wage worker spent roughly 5% of their income on commuting. Today, they spend 12 to 15%. The same trip costs proportionally 3 times more of your earnings. McDonald's arrived in Canada in 1967, and by 1975, it was the go-to cheap meal. A Big Mac cost 75 cents. A small Coke cost 20 cents. Your complete Big Mac meal cost you $1.25. With $5, you could buy 4 complete Big Mac meals. Or you could buy 2 meals for yourself and your partner and still have $2.50 left for something else. But let's break this down more brutally. A family of 4 could eat at McDonald's for $5. Dad gets a Big Mac meal. Mom gets a Big Mac meal. Total cost, $4.15. You have 85 cents left over. You could afford to eat out as a family on a $5 bill and keep change. Today, a Big Mac meal in Canada costs roughly $12. That's 1 meal, not 4. For that same family of 4 to eat at McDonald's today costs around $45 to $50 after tax. The identical meal that cost just over $4 in 1975 costs more than 10 times as much today. But here's what makes this economically devastating. Minimum wage increased from $2.65 to $16.55, a 525% increase. But the Big Mac meal increased from $1.25 to $12, an 860% increase. Food prices rose 63% faster than wages. You're earning more dollars per hour, but those dollars buy significantly less food. In 1975, a minimum wage worker could buy 2 complete Big Mac meals with 1 hour of work and have money left over. Today, a minimum wage worker can afford 1 Big Mac meal and nothing else with 1 hour of pay. Your labor is worth less food now than it was 50 years ago. This is where the economic crime becomes most obvious. In 1975, the average university tuition in Canada was $550 per year for a full-time undergraduate program. You read that correctly. $550 for an entire year. 2 semesters, 8 months of education. Let's do the math that universities and governments don't want you to do. Ontario minimum wage in 1975 was $2.65 per hour. To earn $550 in tuition, you needed to work 208 hours. That's 5.2 weeks of full-time work at 40 hours per week. A student could work 8 weeks over summer break, earn their tuition, and have money left over for books and living expenses. With your $5 in 1975, you could pay for 3.3 days of university education. That's not much by itself, but it shows how accessible higher education was. You could literally work part-time during the school year, 10 to 15 hours per week, and graduate debt-free. Today, the average Canadian university tuition is $6,800 per year. At Ontario's $16.55 minimum wage, you need to work 411 hours to afford tuition. That's 10.3 weeks of full-time work, and that's before living expenses, books, or anything else. You'd need to work the entire summer plus 15 hours per week during school just to cover tuition. Debt-free graduation is mathematically impossible for minimum wage students. But here's the real economic destruction. Tuition increased 1,136% from 1975 to today. Minimum wage increased 525%. Education costs rose more than twice as fast as wages. In 1975, higher education was accessible to working-class students. It requires either wealthy parents or decades of debt. The $5 that paid for 3 days of university in 1975 pays for roughly 2 hours of university today. Same education delivered in the same classroom format, taught by professors with similar qualifications. The value hasn't increased, the price has increased 12-fold. Going to the movies in 1975 was actually affordable entertainment. A movie ticket cost between $2 and $2.50 depending on the theater and city. Let's use $2.25 as average. 2 tickets cost $4.50. A small popcorn cost 50 cents. With your $5, you and your date went to the movies with popcorn and had a nickel left over. The movies were genuinely accessible as weekly entertainment. Families went regularly because the cost was reasonable. A couple could see a movie every weekend for under $10 per month. That was 3 to 4% of minimum wage monthly income, not a luxury. Today, a movie ticket in Canada averages $14 to $16 depending on location and time. 2 tickets cost you $30 minimum. A small popcorn costs $8. Your date night at the movies costs $40, and you haven't even added drinks or candy. The experience that cost $5 in 1975 costs 8 times more today. But let's make this hit harder. In 1975, minimum wage was $2.65 per hour. 2 movie tickets and popcorn cost $5, which meant you worked 1.9 hours to afford date night. Today, at $16.55 per hour minimum wage, those 2 tickets and popcorn cost $40, which means you work 2.4 hours. You're working 26% longer in real terms to afford the exact same movie experience. Your $5 bought you an evening of entertainment in 1975. Today, that same $5 covers 12% of a movie ticket. Not the experience, not the popcorn, barely 1/8 of admission. Music was expensive relative to other items in 1975, but still accessible. A new vinyl album cost between $4 and $7, depending on whether it was a single album or double album. Most mainstream releases were $4.99. Your $5 bought you one new album by any major artist. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, ABBA, whatever you wanted. But record stores also sold used albums for $1 to $2. With $5, you could buy 5 used albums and build a serious music collection. Teenagers worked part-time jobs and bought records regularly. Having 100 knitters' 200 albums by graduation wasn't unusual. Music was expensive, but attainable. Today, music is technically cheaper because streaming exists. $10 per month for unlimited music. But let's compare ownership. Vinyl records are back, and new releases cost $35 to $45 each. Used records that cost $1 in 1975 now sell for $15.25 in vintage shops. Your $5 that bought 5 albums in 1975 buys you absolutely nothing in physical music today. Maybe 15% of one album. But here's the economic shift. In 1975, you owned music. You bought it once and had it forever. Today, you rent music. Stop paying Spotify, and you lose everything. The economics changed from ownership to subscription. Young people today spend roughly $120 per year on music streaming. In 1975 dollars, that's $28 per year, which could buy 6 new albums that you owned permanently. The model shifted from purchase to rental because ownership became unaffordable. The $5 that built your music library in 1975 won't even cover half a month of Spotify today. Grocery prices in 1975 seem fictional by today's standards. A gallon of milk cost 98 cents. A loaf of bread cost 35 cents. A pound of ground beef cost $1.19. A dozen eggs cost 75 cents. 5 pounds of potatoes cost 89 cents. With careful shopping, $5 bought substantial food. Let's build a realistic 1975 grocery haul with $5. 1 loaf of bread for 35 cents. 1 pound of ground beef for $1.19. 1 dozen eggs for 75 cents. 1 gallon of milk for 98 cents. 1 pound of cheese for 90 cents. Total is $4.17. You have 83 cents left for produce, getting you several pounds of vegetables or fruit. That's protein, dairy, starch, and produce. A single person could eat for days on $5 of groceries. Today, those identical items cost dramatically more. A loaf of bread costs $3.50. A pound of ground beef costs $7. A dozen eggs cost $4.50. A gallon of milk costs $6. The same basket costs $29. The groceries that cost $4.17 in 1975 cost 7 times more today. But here's where wage growth failed completely. That $4.17 grocery basket was 1.6 hours of minimum wage work in 1975. Today's $29 basket requires 1.75 hours of minimum wage work. You're working 9% longer in real terms to buy the same food. And that's with minimum wage increasing 525%. Food prices increased even faster than that. Your $5 that fed you for a week in 1975 buys you half a grocery store meal deal today. The purchasing power collapse is so extreme, it's hard to comprehend unless you do the math. The numbers aren't just nostalgia, they're evidence of systematic purchasing power destruction. Every item we've covered shows the same pattern. Prices increased 800 to 1,200%. Wages increased 525%. The gap between price growth and wage growth is the stolen wealth of an entire generation. In 1975, a single minimum wage income could support a modest lifestyle. You could afford gas, occasional meals out, entertainment, groceries, and contribute to savings. Not luxury, but stability. Today, minimum wage covers survival expenses with nothing left over. Two incomes barely replicate what one income provided in 1975. The economy didn't grow for workers, it grew for asset owners. If you owned a house, stocks, or a business in 1975, your wealth increased massively. The average house appreciated from $43,000 to $720,000. If you were earning wages, your purchasing power collapsed. The minimum wage worker in 1975 could afford more life than the minimum wage worker today, despite today's worker earning 6 times more dollars. This is why younger generations can't replicate their parents' lives. It's not laziness, it's math. The same work that bought a house, car, education, and family in 1975 buys rent, debt, and survival today. The $5 that represented possibility in 1975 represents almost nothing today. The economy didn't break by accident. It was restructured to transfer wealth from labor to capital. Your $5 in 1975 could buy a full life. Today, it barely buys an hour of it. That's not inflation. That's theft.